In a grand amphitheater on the distant planet Centrix, representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for what was supposed to be a historic peace summit. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs as beings of all shapes and sizes took their seats. Among them were two humans. Ambassador Laura Hayes, a calm and composed woman in her late 40s, and Captain Eric Dawson, a tall man with sharp features who carried himself with military precision. They represented Earth, a planet still considered young and inexperienced by many of the older civilizations present. The walls of the amphitheater shimmered faintly, reflecting the light from glowing orbs that floated above like miniature suns. Alien delegates moved about, some with sleek metallic skin, others with translucent bodies that seemed to shift colors depending on their mood. Despite the beauty of the setting, there was an undercurrent of tension. Everyone knew this meeting would shape the future of intergalactic relations, and not everyone was happy about humanity's presence. Laura stood near the edge of the platform reserved for Earth's delegation. She glanced at Eric, who leaned against the railing, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He looked uneasy, and she couldn't blame him. For weeks, they had been trying to negotiate fair trade agreements with the Galactic Council, but every proposal they made was met with resistance. The Council wanted Earth to adopt strict regulations that would limit its access to critical resources. To Laura, it felt less like negotiation and more like bullying. "Do you think they'll ever listen?" Eric asked quietly, breaking the silence between them. His voice carried just enough frustration to make Laura turn toward him. "They have no choice," she replied firmly, though her expression betrayed her own doubts. "We're here because we deserve a seat at the table. If they don't hear us now, they'll regret it later." As the session began, a towering alien named Cal Vorn stepped forward to address the assembly. His deep voice echoed through the chamber as he spoke about unity and cooperation. But when he mentioned Earth, his tone shifted slightly, just enough for Laura to notice. He praised humanity's rapid progress, but warned that unchecked ambition could destabilize the galaxy. It wasn't subtle, and it certainly wasn't friendly. Laura clenched her fists beneath the table. She had heard this rhetoric before. To the Council, humanity was reckless, a child playing with tools it didn't fully understand. What they failed to see was how hard Earth had worked to earn its place among the stars. Countless lives had been lost exploring uncharted space, and billions more depended on the decisions being made here today. When it was her turn to speak, Laura rose gracefully from her seat. All eyes turned to her as she approached the center of the stage. Her heart pounded, but years of diplomacy kept her steady. "We came here seeking partnership," she began, her voice clear and strong. "But instead, we've been met with demands that threaten our very survival. We are willing to cooperate, but not at the cost of our freedom or dignity." Her words hung in the air, drawing mixed reactions. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Cal watched her closely, his expression unreadable. Laura returned to her seat, feeling both proud and drained. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but one thing was certain: humanity wasn't going to back down without a fight. As the day wore on, the discussions grew heated. Each proposal from Earth was shot down, each argument dismissed. By the time the session ended, Laura could feel the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. As she walked out of the amphitheater with Eric by her side, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play, something far beyond simple negotiations. Whatever it was, she knew it would change everything, for better or worse. The days following the first session of the Peace Summit were tense for Laura Hayes and Captain Eric Dawson. Back in their quarters aboard the orbital station, they reviewed recordings of the meeting, searching for clues about why the Council seemed so unwilling to meet them halfway. Laura replayed Cal Vorn's speech several times, focusing on his subtle jabs at humanity's recklessness. There was something calculated in his words, almost as if he wanted to provoke a reaction. "They're trying to paint us as the bad guys," Eric said, pacing back and forth across the small room. His boots clicked softly against the metal floor. "Every time we push back, they act like we're being unreasonable. Laura nodded slowly, her brow furrowed in thought. "It's not just that," she replied. "They're testing us, seeing how far we'll go before we give up or lash out." She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The stress of the situation was starting to wear on her. But we can't let them win. If we fold now, Earth will lose its voice forever. Meanwhile, outside the safety of their private discussions, things weren't going much better. Word had spread quickly among the alien delegates about humanity's defiance during the negotiations. Some viewed it as admirable, a show of strength from a species still finding its footing in the galaxy. Others, however, saw it as proof that humans were too stubborn and unpredictable to trust. Whispers followed Laura and Eric wherever they went, and the atmosphere grew increasingly hostile. Back on Earth, news outlets picked up snippets of what was happening at the summit. Headlines blared accusations of alien oppression, while pundits debated whether humanity should even bother staying at the negotiating table. Public opinion began to shift, with many citizens rallying behind Laura and Eric. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read, "Stand strong," and "No surrender." It was clear that people back home supported their leader's decision to fight for fairness, even if it meant walking away. Despite the growing support, Laura couldn't ignore the cracks forming within her own team. One of her advisors, a young man named Ryan Cole, approached her late one evening after another frustrating day of talks. "Ambassador," he began hesitantly, "do you really think this is worth it? Every time we speak up, they shut us down harder. Maybe we should consider backing off for now." Laura looked at him sharply. "Backing off won't solve anything," she said firmly. "If we cave now, they'll only demand more later. We need to hold our ground." Ryan sighed but didn't argue further. He knew she was right, but the pressure was taking its toll on everyone. Even Eric, who usually maintained a stoic demeanor, seemed more irritable than usual. During meals, he barely touched his food, preferring instead to stare out the window at the swirling nebula beyond. As the second round of negotiations approached, tensions reached a boiling point. This time, when Laura addressed the council, her tone carried an edge of frustration. "We've come here in good faith," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "But your refusal to listen tells me you don't value partnership. You value control." Her words sparked murmurs throughout the chamber. Some delegates nodded approvingly, while others exchanged annoyed glances. Cal Vorn stepped forward once again, his tall frame casting a shadow over the stage. "Ambassador Hayes," he said smoothly, "your passion is commendable, but perhaps misplaced. The Council exists to maintain order, not cater to individual demands." Laura clenched her jaw, resisting the urge to snap back. Instead, she turned to face the other delegates. "Order doesn't mean domination," she countered. "True peace comes from mutual respect, not fear." The room fell silent, the weight of her statement hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, it seemed like someone might actually listen. But then Cale raised a hand, signaling the end of the discussion. The session adjourned without resolution, leaving Laura and Eric feeling more isolated than ever. That night, as they walked through the dimly lit corridors of the station, Eric broke the silence. "Do you think anyone here truly understands what we're fighting for?" Laura paused, gazing out a nearby viewport at the endless expanse of stars. "Maybe not," she admitted, "but we have to keep trying. If we stop, we lose more than just this negotiation. We lose ourselves." Eric didn't respond, but his expression softened. They both knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. Yet, as they stood there together, surrounded by the vastness of space, they also knew they weren't ready to give up. Not yet. The morning of the third negotiation session arrived, but Laura Hayes felt no sense of hope as she prepared to face the council once again. The previous days had drained her patience and optimism, leaving behind only a quiet determination. She glanced at Eric Dawson, who was adjusting his uniform in the mirror of their quarters. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if he were trying to delay the inevitable. "You ready for this?" Eric asked without turning around. His voice was calm, but there was an underlying tension that betrayed his frustration. "As ready as I'll ever be," Laura replied, straightening her jacket. Her reflection showed a woman who looked older than her years, with faint lines forming around her eyes from countless sleepless nights. Still, she forced herself to smile. "Let's just get it over with." When they entered the amphitheater, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. The alien delegates seemed restless, exchanging hushed conversations in languages Laura couldn't understand. Cal Vorn stood near the center of the stage, his towering figure commanding attention even before he spoke. As Laura took her place, she noticed how some of the other ambassadors avoided meeting her gaze. It was clear they had already made up their minds about humanity. The session began with predictable formalities, but it wasn't long before things turned confrontational. When Laura presented yet another proposal, this one carefully crafted to address both Earth's needs and the Council's concerns, it was met with immediate rejection. Cale didn't even let her finish before interrupting. "Ambassador Hayes," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "perhaps you misunderstand the purpose of these negotiations. This is not a forum for demands, but for compromise. Your continued resistance only proves our initial assessment correct. Humanity is unwilling to cooperate." Laura's hands tightened on the edge of the podium. She wanted to argue, to shout that their so-called compromises were anything but fair. But instead, she took a deep breath and stepped back. For the first time, she realized something important. They weren't going to listen. No matter what she said or did, the Council had already decided humanity's fate. Turning to face the assembly, Laura's expression softened, though her eyes burned with resolve. "If compromise means giving up everything we've worked for, then I'm afraid we cannot stay here any longer," she announced, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Earth will not bow to unfair terms or surrender its independence. We came here seeking peace, but it seems peace is not what you're offering." A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. Some delegates looked shocked, while others exchanged smug glances. Cal raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "You would walk away from the greatest opportunity your species has ever been given?" he asked, his tone mocking. "Yes," Laura replied simply. "Because staying here under these conditions would mean losing ourselves." Without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit, Eric following closely behind her. The room fell silent as they left, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the vast space. Once outside, Laura paused in the corridor, leaning against the wall as she tried to steady her breathing. Eric stood beside her, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "What now?" he asked quietly. Laura looked up, her jaw set firmly. "Now we go home and prepare for whatever comes next." They wanted defiance. They'll get it. Though walking away felt like admitting defeat, Laura knew it was the right choice. Humanity might have lost the battle in that room, but the war for its future was far from over. And as they boarded their ship later that day, leaving Zentrix behind, Laura couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. They hadn't backed down, and that meant something. News of Earth's dramatic exit from the Peace Summit spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Within hours, reports reached every corner of known space, sparking debates and reactions among countless civilizations. Some alien species viewed humanity's departure as reckless and immature, proof that humans were too unpredictable to be trusted. Others, however, saw it differently. To them, Earth's decision to walk away was a bold statement, a refusal to bow to pressure or accept unfair treatment. These contrasting opinions ignited fierce discussions in council chambers, marketplaces, and even private homes. On Earth, the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Citizens gathered around screens in public squares, cheering as clips of Laura Hayes' final speech played on repeat. Her words, "Staying here under these conditions would mean losing ourselves," resonated deeply with people who had grown tired of feeling powerless. Protesters marched through city streets, holding banners that read, "Stand with humanity," and "No surrender." Even world leaders, who had been divided before, united in praising Laura and Eric Dawson for standing firm against the Galactic Council. But not everyone celebrated. In quieter corners of Earth, concerns began to surface. Farmers worried about how strained relations with alien powers might affect food imports. Scientists fretted over losing access to advanced technologies shared by other species. And military officials braced themselves for potential conflict, knowing tensions could escalate quickly. Despite the widespread pride in humanity's defiance, there was an underlying unease, a fear of what might come next. Meanwhile, aboard their ship en route back to Earth, Laura and Eric struggled to process everything that had happened. The weight of their decision hung heavily between them. Neither spoke much during the journey, each lost in their own thoughts. Laura stared out the viewport at the endless expanse of stars, wondering if they'd made the right choice. Had they protected Earth's dignity, or had they just painted a target on its back? Eric, sitting nearby, tapped his fingers absently on the armrest of his chair, replaying moments from the summit in his mind. Their worries weren't unfounded. Back on Centrix, the fallout from Earth's departure dominated conversations among the council members. Cal Vorn tried to downplay the incident, dismissing humanity as insignificant, but not everyone agreed. Ambassador Nira Solis of the aquatic Velani race voiced her concerns openly during a closed-door session. "We cannot ignore what happened," she said, her melodic voice cutting through the murmurs. "Humans may be young, but they are resourceful and determined. Pushing them away could have consequences none of us are prepared for." Her words struck a chord with some delegates, though others dismissed her warnings. A small faction within the council began quietly discussing whether reopening negotiations might be wise, but Kale shut them down firmly. They walked away, he reminded everyone. Let them deal with the consequences. As days passed, those consequences started to reveal themselves. Skirmishes broke out near Earth's borders, where human ships clashed with vessels loyal to the Council. Most encounters were minor, warnings fired across bows or brief standoffs, but the message was clear: hostility was rising. Eric monitored these incidents closely once they returned to Earth, coordinating defensive strategies while preparing for the worst. Laura, meanwhile, focused on rallying global support. She traveled across continents, addressing crowds and urging unity. "This isn't just about us," she told one audience. "It's about proving we can stand together, no matter what challenges arise." Her speeches inspired many, but she knew inspiration alone wouldn't protect Earth. Amid all the chaos, one thing became certain: humanity's decision to leave the summit had changed everything. The galaxy was watching now, waiting to see what Earth would do next. Would humanity rise to meet this challenge, or would it crumble under the pressure? Only time would tell. Back on Centrix, the Galactic Council found itself in disarray. The departure of Earth's delegation had left a void that no one seemed prepared to fill. While some council members dismissed humanity as irrelevant, others couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. Whispers spread through the corridors of the council chambers, and behind closed doors, urgent discussions took place. Ambassador Calvorn called an emergency meeting to address the growing unease. He stood at the center of the chamber, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over the other delegates. "We must not let this incident distract us," he began, his deep voice echoing through the room. "Humans are unpredictable, yes, but they are also weak. They lack the resources and technology to pose any real threat." His words were meant to reassure, but they only fueled skepticism among certain members. Ambassador Nira Solis exchanged glances with a few others who shared her doubts. She had spent years studying humanity and knew their potential better than most. When it was her turn to speak, she rose gracefully, her fluid movements drawing attention. "Cal, you underestimate them," Nira said, her tone calm but firm. "Their technological advancements may not match ours yet, but their rate of progress is extraordinary. In just decades, they've achieved what took other species centuries. And now, we've pushed them into a corner. Do you truly believe they will simply fade away?" Kale frowned, clearly irritated by her challenge. "They are children playing with fire," he replied dismissively. "Children can be controlled." Nira shook her head, her shimmering skin reflecting the light in a way that made her seem almost otherworldly. "You're wrong. Humanity thrives under pressure. Their history shows it. When faced with adversity, they innovate, adapt, and fight back. By isolating them, we risk creating an enemy far more dangerous than you realize." Her argument sparked murmurs throughout the chamber. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others remained unconvinced. One ambassador, a small insect-like being named Zirin Exile, leaned forward. "If what Nira says is true, then we have made a grave mistake. But how do we fix it without appearing weak?" The question hung in the air, unanswered for several moments. Finally, another delegate, a soft-spoken representative from the Luminary Collective, spoke up. "Perhaps the first step is acknowledging our error. Humanity values honesty. If we reach out with sincerity, they might listen." Kale scoffed at the suggestion. "Reaching out implies weakness. We cannot appear divided or uncertain. But appearing united at the cost of reality is equally dangerous," Nira countered. "If we continue down this path, we risk driving them further away, or worse, into alliances with factions hostile to us." The debate dragged on late into the night, with tempers flaring and voices rising. By the time the session ended, no clear solution had emerged. Yet cracks were beginning to form in Cal's dominance. Several delegates privately approached Nira afterward, expressing their concerns and asking for her guidance. She listened carefully, knowing this was a pivotal moment, not just for humanity, but for the Council itself. Meanwhile, aboard Earth's orbiting defense stations, Captain Eric Dawson monitored reports of escalating skirmishes near the planet's borders. Alien ships lingered closer than ever before, testing Earth's defenses. Each encounter left him more convinced that war might be inevitable. He relayed updates to Laura Hayes, who was still traveling the globe to rally support. "We're holding our own for now," Eric told her during one encrypted call. "But I don't know how long we can keep this up. Sooner or later, they'll push too far." Laura sighed, rubbing her temples. "I know," she admitted, "but we can't afford to back down. Not after everything we've sacrificed." As tensions mounted on both sides, whispers of dissent within the Galactic Council grew louder. For the first time, influential voices questioned whether isolating Earth had been the right decision. Unbeknownst to humanity, seeds of doubt were taking root among their adversaries, a development that could change everything. It was late at night when Laura Hayes received the message. She had just returned to her quarters after another long day of meetings with Earth's leaders, strategizing how to prepare for the growing tensions in space. The encrypted transmission came through on a secure channel, marked urgent. At first, she hesitated. Anything labeled urgent these days usually meant bad news. But something about the sender's name caught her attention. Ambassador Nira Solis. Laura sat down at her desk and opened the message. It was brief but direct. "Ambassador Hayes, I wish to speak with you privately. What has been done cannot be undone, but perhaps it is not too late to prevent further damage. If you are willing, meet me aboard Station Zenith within 24 hours. The message ended with coordinates and a time. Laura read it twice, her mind racing. Nira Solis was one of the few voices on the Galactic Council who had shown any sympathy toward humanity during the summit. Could this be genuine, or was it a trap? She forwarded the message to Eric Dawson, knowing he would have valuable input. Within minutes, his reply arrived. "Be careful, but don't ignore this. We need allies if we're going to survive what's coming." The next day, Laura boarded a small shuttle bound for Station Zenith, a remote orbital platform located in neutral territory. Eric accompanied her, his hand resting near the weapon at his side as they approached the station. Neither of them spoke much during the journey. Both were too focused on what might await them. When they arrived, Nira greeted them personally. Her shimmering form moved gracefully across the docking bay, her presence calming despite the tension in the air. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I know trust is scarce between us now, but I hope to change that. Laura nodded cautiously. Why should we believe anything you say? Nera didn't flinch at the question. Instead, she led them to a private chamber and activated a shield to ensure their conversation remained confidential. Once seated, she began speaking. What happened at the summit was not an accident. Cal Vorn manipulated data to make humanity appear more threatening than it truly is. He fears your rapid progress and sees you as a challenge to the Council's authority. Eric leaned forward, his expression hardening. So he painted us as villains to justify shutting us out. Yes, Nera confirmed. But others among us see the truth. Humanity's defiance inspired many who feel trapped by the Council's rigid control. You have supporters, though they remain silent for now. Laura felt a flicker of hope, but kept her emotions in check. Even if that's true, why help us? What do you gain? I seek balance, Nera replied simply. A fractured galaxy benefits no one. If Earth falls, or worse, becomes an enemy, you will destabilize everything. My people depend on peace, and I believe working with you is the only way to preserve it. For a moment, silence filled the room. Laura exchanged a glance with Eric, silently weighing their options. Finally, she spoke. If we work together, what do you propose? Nera explained her plan. Covert cooperation. She would provide intelligence about the Council's movements and help Earth navigate the political landscape. In return, Laura and Eric had to promise discretion. Any sign of collaboration could ruin Nera's position and turn the Council fully against them. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than facing the galaxy alone. After a long pause, Laura extended her hand. We'll do it. But if this goes wrong, we'll handle it our way. Nera mirrored the gesture, her translucent hand glowing faintly as it touched Laura's. Understood. For now, let us focus on survival, for all our sakes. As they left the station, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into uncharted territory. Trusting an alien ally was risky, but staying isolated would guarantee failure. For the first time since leaving Zentrix, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. The alliance with Nera Solis marked a turning point, but it didn't bring immediate relief. Shadows of war loomed larger each day, and the strain on humanity's defenses grew unbearable. Captain Eric Dawson spent most of his time aboard the command center of Earth's primary defense fleet, monitoring alien activity near their borders. The skirmishes had escalated. What once began as probing encounters now felt like deliberate acts of aggression. One evening, Eric stood in front of a massive holographic map displaying the positions of alien ships. Red dots clustered dangerously close to Earth's outer systems. He tapped a finger against the console, his jaw clenched tightly. They're testing us, he muttered under his breath. His second in command, Lieutenant Ryan Cole, approached cautiously. Orders, sir? Ryan asked, his voice tinged with concern. Eric hesitated before responding. Hold position for now, but alert all squadrons. They need to be ready at a moment's notice. As the days passed, clashes became more frequent. Alien vessels would cross into human-controlled space, fire warning shots, and retreat just enough to avoid full-scale engagement. It was psychological warfare, designed to wear down morale. Yet Eric refused to let them gain ground. Under his leadership, Earth's pilots responded with precision and discipline, holding the line despite overwhelming odds. Back on Earth, Laura Hayes worked tirelessly to keep spirits high. She traveled from city to city, addressing crowds and urging unity. Her speeches emphasized resilience and determination, reminding people that humanity's strength lay in its ability to adapt and endure. We've faced challenges before, she told one audience, and every time we've risen stronger than ever. This is no different. But behind closed doors, Laura carried the weight of uncertainty. Late at night, she reviewed reports sent by Eric and listened to updates from Nera about the Council's movements. The information Nera provided was invaluable, but it also painted a grim picture. Kel Vorn was rallying support among key factions, pushing for stricter measures against Earth. Meanwhile, whispers of an impending blockade spread through diplomatic channels, a move that could cripple Earth's economy and isolate the planet completely. Laura knew they couldn't wait for the situation to worsen. She arranged another secret meeting with Nira, this time aboard a hidden outpost deep in uncharted space. When they met, Nira looked troubled, her shimmering form dimmer than usual. "Time is running out," she said without preamble. "Kel has convinced several species to join his cause. If he succeeds, the Council will declare Earth a rogue entity, giving him free rein to act." Laura's heart sank, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What can we do to stop him?" Nara hesitated before replying. "You must show strength, not recklessness, but resolve. Prove to the galaxy that humanity cannot be pushed around. And when the time comes, I'll do what I can to sway undecided delegates." It wasn't much, but it was a plan. Returning to Earth, Laura shared the details with Eric and their advisors. Together, they devised a bold strategy, a coordinated display of force along Earth's borders. Using intelligence provided by Nira, they identified weak points in the enemy's formations and launched targeted strikes, not to destroy, but to send a clear message. The operation went smoothly. Human ships moved swiftly and decisively, driving back intruders without causing significant casualties. News of the successful defense spread quickly, boosting morale both on Earth and among sympathetic alien factions. For the first time, cracks appeared in Cal's narrative of human recklessness. Yet, even as hope flickered, the threat of war remained. Eric continued to prepare for the worst, knowing that peace might still slip through their fingers. Laura, meanwhile, clung to the belief that humanity's perseverance could inspire change, even in the hearts of their adversaries. In the vast expanse of space, where shadows of conflict stretched endlessly, one truth became undeniable. Survival required not only courage but also unity. As humanity stood together, facing an uncertain future, the seeds of resistance began to take root, not just on Earth, but across the stars. The success of humanity's defensive operations sent ripples through the galaxy. News of Earth's coordinated strikes reached even the farthest corners of known space, sparking debates among alien civilizations. For some, it was proof that humans were not to be underestimated. Others saw it as reckless provocation, further fueling calls for action against Earth. But one thing was clear: humanity had drawn a line in the stars, and the Council could no longer ignore them. On Zentrix, tension within the Galactic Council reached a boiling point. Cal Vorn called an emergency session, his frustration evident as he paced the chamber floor. "This is unacceptable," he growled, his voice sharp enough to silence the murmurs of the delegates. "Humans have shown they cannot be trusted. They attack our ships, defy our laws, and now flaunt their defiance before the entire galaxy." Ambassador Nira Solis watched him carefully, her expression calm but alert. She knew this moment would come, the tipping point where Cal's aggression might push the Council into declaring war. Yet, she also saw doubt flickering in the eyes of several delegates. Humanity's recent actions had planted seeds of uncertainty, making some question whether isolation was truly the answer. When it was her turn to speak, Nira rose slowly, drawing all attention to her shimmering form. "Cal, your anger blinds you," she said softly, yet firmly. "Yes, humanity has acted boldly, but have we given them reason to trust us? Have we offered them anything but demands and distrust? Their defiance may stem from fear as much as pride." Her words sparked murmurs throughout the chamber. Some nodded thoughtfully, while others exchanged skeptical glances. One delegate, a reptilian ambassador named Tren Vorik, leaned forward. "What would you suggest, Ambassador Solis? That we simply welcome them back with open arms after their blatant aggression?" "No," Nara replied, "but I propose we extend an olive branch, a chance to reopen dialogue. If we continue down this path, we risk creating an enemy far more dangerous than any of us anticipate." Cal scoffed loudly. "And what if they refuse? What if they see our gesture as weakness? They won't, Nira countered. Humans value honesty and respect. If we approach them sincerely, they will listen. The debate dragged on for hours, with voices rising and tempers flaring. Eventually, a compromise emerged. The council would send envoys to propose renewed negotiations. It wasn't a full retreat. Kale ensured the terms included strict conditions, but it was a step toward reconciliation. The decision passed narrowly, with Nira's quiet persuasion playing a key role. Meanwhile, aboard Earth's orbital defense stations, Eric Dawson monitored incoming transmissions. When word of the Council's proposal arrived, he immediately contacted Laura Hayes. "They want to talk," he said, his tone cautious. "Do you think it's genuine?" Laura studied the message closely, her brow furrowed in thought. "It's hard to say. Cal's fingerprints are all over this. He's still trying to control the narrative. But Nira must have had something to do with it too. Maybe there's room to work here." Eric frowned. "We can't afford to walk into another trap." "You're right," Laura agreed. "But we can't afford to ignore it either. Let's meet them, but on neutral ground with safeguards in place." She drafted a response, agreeing to negotiations under specific conditions, a neutral location, independent mediators, and guarantees of safe passage. To her surprise, the council accepted without argument. As preparations began, Laura felt a mix of hope and apprehension. This could be their chance to rebuild trust, or it could be another ploy to undermine humanity. In the days leading up to the meeting, Laura and Eric worked tirelessly to prepare. They reviewed strategies, rehearsed responses, and fortified Earth's defenses in case the talks failed. Despite the risks, Laura couldn't help but feel a spark of optimism. Humanity had proven its strength, and now it had an opportunity to prove its wisdom. As their ship departed for the designated rendezvous point, Laura gazed out at the stars, her mind racing with possibilities. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see how this chapter would unfold. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: humanity would face it together. The meeting took place aboard a remote orbital station known as Haven 7, a neutral zone that had been untouched by galactic politics for decades. Its sterile corridors and minimalist design gave it an almost clinical feel, but the location was chosen precisely because it offered no advantage to either side. Laura Hayes and Eric Dawson arrived with a small team, their faces set with determination. They were met by a delegation from the Galactic Council, led by Cal Vorn, who looked as imposing as ever. Ambassador Nira Solis stood quietly off to the side, her presence a reassuring constant. As they entered the negotiation chamber, Laura felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The room was circular, with a large table in the center surrounded by chairs. Each seat was carefully spaced, an unspoken acknowledgement of the tension between the two sides. Laura chose her spot deliberately, positioning herself so she could see everyone clearly while maintaining eye contact with Kale. "Let's begin," Kale said without preamble, his tone clipped. He wasted no time laying out the Council's terms: stricter oversight of Earth's activities, mandatory compliance with galactic trade laws, and regular inspections to ensure adherence. To anyone else, these might have sounded reasonable, but Laura recognized them for what they were: another attempt to control humanity under the guise of cooperation. When it was her turn to speak, Laura leaned forward slightly, her voice steady and measured. "We're here because we want peace, not submission," she began. "Your terms are one-sided and ignore the realities of our situation. If you truly seek partnership, then let's build something fair, not a list of demands." Cal's expression hardened, but before he could respond, Nira interjected gently. "Perhaps we should focus on shared goals rather than past grievances," she suggested. Her words diffused some of the hostility in the room, allowing both sides to take a step back. Over the next several hours, the discussions grew heated. Laura argued passionately for Earth's right to self-determination, pointing out how humanity had already demonstrated its willingness to cooperate when treated with respect. Eric added his perspective, highlighting the defensive nature of their recent actions and emphasizing that conflict benefited no one. On the other side, Kale pushed back relentlessly, his arguments laced with thinly veiled threats. Yet, cracks began to show in his armor. Several council members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with his aggressive stance. Slowly, progress emerged. With Nira acting as mediator, compromises started to form. Trade regulations were adjusted to give Earth more flexibility, while inspection protocols were scaled back to avoid appearing invasive. Laura made sure every agreement was documented clearly, ensuring there would be no room for misinterpretation later. By the end of the session, exhaustion hung heavy in the air, but there was also a sense of cautious optimism. Both sides had given ground, and though trust remained fragile, the foundation for a new relationship had been laid. As they prepared to leave, Kale approached Laura reluctantly. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low. "But perhaps we can find a way forward." Laura met his gaze evenly. "I hope so, for all our sakes." Back aboard their ship, Laura allowed herself a brief moment of relief. Eric watched her closely, noting the faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Do you think it'll stick?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we've planted a seed. That's more than we had before." As they departed Haven 7, the galaxy seemed quieter somehow, as if holding its breath. For now, the path ahead looked less treacherous, though challenges undoubtedly remained. Humanity had taken a step toward rebuilding trust, proving that even in the vastness of space, understanding could bridge the widest divides. The agreement reached at Haven 7 marked a fragile but hopeful turning point. News of the tentative peace deal spread quickly, reaching every corner of Earth and sparking celebrations in cities across the globe. People gathered in public squares, cheering as images of Laura Hayes and Eric Dawson appeared on screens alongside highlights from the negotiations. For the first time in months, there was a sense of optimism, a belief that humanity's future among the stars might not be defined by conflict after all. Laura stood on a stage in Central Park, addressing a sea of faces bathed in sunlight. Her voice carried strength and warmth as she spoke about the road ahead. "This is not the end of our journey," she told the crowd. "It's only the beginning. We've shown the galaxy what we're capable of, standing firm when it mattered most and finding common ground even in the face of adversity." Eric watched from the sidelines, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't one for speeches, but he couldn't deny the pride swelling in his chest. Humanity had proven itself resilient, adaptable, and determined. Yet, as much as he wanted to celebrate, part of him remained cautious. Trust took years to build, and one misstep could undo everything they'd worked so hard to achieve. Back on Centrix, reactions within the Galactic Council were mixed. Kel Vorn remained skeptical, his sharp features betraying lingering resentment. But others, inspired by Nirasolis's quiet diplomacy, began to see humanity in a new light. Ambassador Trenvorek, once a vocal critic of Earth, admitted during a private meeting that humans had earned their place at the table through sheer determination. "Perhaps they are not so different from us," he mused aloud. Naira herself felt a quiet satisfaction. She had played her part carefully, balancing the needs of her people with her belief in fairness. As she walked through the council chambers, she noticed subtle shifts in tone. Fewer dismissive remarks about humanity and more genuine curiosity about their potential contributions to galactic society. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal, or at least as close to normal as it could be under the watchful eyes of the galaxy. Trade routes reopened cautiously, and scientists resumed collaborations with alien counterparts. Borders remained guarded, but tensions eased as both sides honored the terms of the agreement. Humanity's defensive fleets stayed vigilant, ready to respond if needed, but encounters with alien ships became less hostile and more routine. Laura and Eric continued to work closely together, ensuring Earth upheld its promises while advocating for greater autonomy where necessary. Their partnership had grown stronger through shared struggles, each drawing strength from the other's resolve. Together, they represented not just leadership but hope for Earth and for the galaxy. As weeks turned into months, the lessons of the summit lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed it. The path to peace required humility, patience, and mutual respect. No single species held all the answers, but by working together, solutions could be found. Humanity's defiance had sparked change, not just for themselves but for others who longed for a fairer system. One evening, Laura stood on the balcony of her quarters, gazing up at the stars. Eric joined her silently, leaning against the railing beside her. Neither spoke for a moment. The quiet between them carried its own weight. "You think we made the right choice?" Eric asked finally, breaking the stillness. Laura smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the distant glow of constellations. "We'll never know for sure, but I do know this. We didn't give up. And sometimes that's enough." In the vast expanse of space, where countless worlds orbited endless suns, humanity had taken its place among the stars. The journey was far from over, but for now, they had found their footing. Through courage, unity, and an unshakable belief in themselves, they had proven that even the smallest voices could shape the destiny of the galaxy.